So, what's the furthest back you can remember? Like, if you really think about it, like, what's the farthest back you can remember?
I started driving tractors when I was about 11.
What was it like when? So that would be 1952,
Right.
right around then.
Yeah, 52, 53.
What was this area like when?
We had just 3 houses on this road back then. And it was an old gravel road.
So, Did you guys all own the land that you used to farm on back then?
Right. Back then we owned it. We had about, I don't know, 250 acres.
250 acres.
Right.
That's quite a bit of land.
Because we had, across the tracks, there used to be a railroad track right in back of the house. And the old steam engines would run through. And then a lot of it was like wasteland, but it was just good for pasture. Well, we had a big herd of cattle, probably about 20, 25. And they kept that down real nice and clean. And now when you go back and look over it, it's all overgrown with brush and stuff and trees, and they call it Salt Creek down here. And there's years ago we used to be able to go fishing down there and catch some big salmon that was anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that one day they brought up 92 and they canned them.
That's a whole lot.
That's a bunch of fish. They had a wheelbarrow headed bring them up.
Do you remember your time in the service?
I was a weekend warrior is what they call them. I was in for 6 months. And then basically all I did was go in to get acclimated to being in the service, and then they run you through to advanced training. And it wasn't hard. It's just, you're away from home, you can't do anything. When I was in the service there, we never smoked. I never smoked before I went to the service. And the only time we could get out away from the DIs, that's drill instructor, was you'd go for a cigarette break. But you went as a group, the whole class would go. And if you didn't smoke, then you'd have to stay in the barracks maybe and clean up while the other guys were enjoying a smoke.
And how old were you when that occurred? When
22.
You were 22, so that
Right.
was 63 or
Right.
64?
Yes, it was in October of 63. I don't know, I can't remember how many we had in the unit with us.
Do you remember like what the climate of like around here was, like with the civil rights and?
They never had that.
Not here?
No, they didn't. They weren't concerned about that. It's just like it was a dead issue. It was something that was brought up later years.
Years later?
Right.
So you can, like, you never saw like the impact of the Civil Rights Act
No.
or Martin Luther
No.
King or nobody around here?
No.
Well, I guess that would make sense because of the demographics of the area.
Right. We went to Parris Island, South Carolina for basic training. And when you're in the service there, you don't you're supposed to move as like one unit, you know, there's not a lot of people running here, running there, you're just together with your.
You're all
buddies.
together.
And you can always remember that you're supposed to stand at attention and you don't move. Well, they had them darn sand fleas that would bite your ears, and it's so gosh darn hard, and they bit hard, and they're just a little devil.
So then you ended up coming back home around.
Right. After I served 6 months.
After that 6 months, so that'd be spring or summer of '64.
Right. No, it was in the springtime.
Oh, it was spring. Okay.
And it seemed like I went to the reserves so that I could help on a farm after the service, because we were fairly good-sized farmers then.
So you ended up coming back and working on the farm all that time?
Right. And then it just seemed like I stayed there until I retired a few years ago.
Let's talk about like the heyday of the farm. So we'll a little farther down the road. So we'll say about, I don't know, right around the time you met Graham. Like what was like everything like here?
Well, we had a lot of vacant fields here, and we were running cattle, so we would make hay, and it was just across the road from us. And then it seems like towards the end of the 60s is that it started building up around here. And now we got people that are, you know, there's so many of them, we don't even really know our neighbors at all.
Besides those that have lived here forever.
Right. But there's lots of pleasures around too. It seemed like in the 50s there was lots of kids that were around. McCool was up in Blooming, and that's just probably a couple miles away from us. And in the evenings we play all kinds of games.
Do you remember do you remember high school or anything like that? Do you remember that far back? What was that like?
Well, I think there was 119 kids when I graduated. And they had the usual sports, but they didn't have no soccer. They had football, baseball, and track.
No basketball?
And they had basketball. But some of the new modern games, they don't have that. It wasn't offered in the school.
And did you go to Portage High School or?
Right.
Do you remember when you met Graham? Do you remember that?
Yeah, she was walking down the road. Right. She had been married before. I was around 32 when we got married. It was a first-time offense for us.
Been married ever since.
Right. 43 years.
43 years.
Right.
What was it like having the kids around here when?
Well, you're used to kids, but it's still a different story when you get married and you already have kids that are 6 and 7 years old. It's kind of something to get used to, that you're asking your helping other people then. And you got someone to care about.
Now, would you put Eddie and Brian to work when
Right, they had their chores.
they had their chores?
Right, but there was nothing really major about them except when they was putting up hay, they were helping us
You
then.
tasked them with the hay?
Right. It's kinda unusual to see boys that are around 60 to 70 pounds, maybe 80 pounds, putting up 50-pound bales all day, you know, and not complaining about it.
What about Uncle John? He stuck around, right?
Right, we both did. He was in the Army.
Now, was he deployed anywhere, or did he
No,
do the same thing you did?
he was in the regular Army.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't in the reserves. But my dad he was getting up there in years too. And we were farming about 1,500 acres.
So it went up from 250 to 1,500.
Right.
It shuts off after 12 minutes.
So,
All right, now we're. So, where were we?
we were at 1,500 acres.
1,500 acres.
Right.
And
And
like,
there wasn't much traffic on the roads. You could go down with any piece of equipment, you know, you didn't have no trouble with cars and that. Because it was still kind of a quiet town.
even into like the 70s, or
Right, but then they were really booming housing around here.
then I'm just trying to.
Because you go down the road with a piece of equipment that's 15 foot wide.
And
And
it'll
you've
take.
got room for, it's just a 2-lane road.
Yeah.
And it's really stretching it, saying it's 2 lanes because there's trees overgrown and you have to get off the side of the road and there's ditches and you have all kinds of problems getting down. And now, today, I don't know if we could go down the road with that equipment. There's so much traffic.
Like what variety of equipment did you guys have back then? Like, was it a little bit of everything, or?
A little bit of everything, but our major one was John Deere. We had quite a few John Deeres.
Combines and tractors and.
Right, and planters. And all the equipment that would go with a farm. And nowadays, I don't know if we could even start up farming again, because it's,
It's very
when you
expensive.
talk about $300,000 for a combine, and that's not including the grain head, some of them is like $100,000 for the grain head, so you get $400,000
Tied up
wrapped
into one
up.
fee.
real quick. And years ago, they never had the yields that they do now.
Because they've made hybrid strains of corn
Right.
and soy. And
Right. And years ago, you used to be able to buy seed corn for $10 to $50 a bag. $50 was a real hybrid. And now, today, they got seed corn that's over $400
for a bag.
for a bag. And a bag would do, pardon me, would do like 3.5 acres.
So not a whole lot.
No, so then when you start adding that up, you know, the farmer's expenses go out of sight.
Because didn't most farmers run on loans from the banks?
Right, they have to. because the price of corn that you received was like $1.50 a bushel. And when you start adding all the expenses up, you're running a fine line there.
So a good year could turn into a bad year very,
Right.
very quickly.
Right, because you're struggling. The most we ever received for corn was, I think, $5.16.
What year was that?
That was back probably about 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
Right,
That's fairly recent.
right.
What do you think of the current, like everything that's going on, like currently, like what do you think, like looking back upon all
Right.
your whole life, like
Like you know, when John died, I had to quit farming because we still owed quite a bit of money. And by the time everything was settled, you know, we had some left over, but when I tried to figure it out as far as farming for a year, it wasn't gonna add up because I had to buy everything.
all over again?
Right. But I look back on, it's an enjoyable life getting out in the fresh air and out there
Every
against the
day.
elements.
Like, is there any like particular story about like planting or picking or anything like that that still sticks out after all this time?
Right. You know, years ago, they never had anything on the planner that would tell you if you have a plugged row. Well, you know, if you have a plugged row, you're done for the year on that row because there's nothing there. And nowadays, they got such sophisticated stuff that it'll tell you which row is plugged up and if it's producing or if it's depositing the right amount of seeds per row. And some of them, they've got them where that they can push a button and it'll turn the tractor around for you on the end and put the planter down
And replant that
And-
plugged row.
and plant. Yeah, usually on that one row, it's when you have 8 and 12, 16 row. If you got a plugged one, it's kind of hard to go back with a planter. Usually you have a one row planter for that. But with that new modern sophisticated stuff, you don't see very many missed rows.
Okay, I think that's plenty. I think that's plenty enough. Thanks again. Thank you again, Gramps. I really appreciate it.